How frequently should I replace liquid metal is probably one of the most common questions we get. Liquid metal is applied between the CPU die and the IHS, or integrated heat spreader, to improve thermal conductivity from the silicon to the heat spreader, but there hasn't been much long-term testing on liquid metal endurance versus age. Cracking and drying are some of the most common concerns from commenters, leading users to wonder whether liquid metal performance will fall off a cliff at some point due to age. One of our test benches has been running thermal endurance cycling tests for the last year now, since September of 2017, just to see if there's been any aging that's impacted performance. Before that, this video is brought to you by us and the Gamers Nexus store at store.gamersnexus.net. You can pick up one of our mod mats now on back order because they keep selling out, or you can grab one of our other products like the Raglan two-tone hoodie, which we have in stock, or the full Gamers Nexus logo t-shirt that we just restocked in cotton and tri-blend. Learn more at store.gamersnexus.net. So this is a case study of liquid metal and delidding. You've all heard of delidding. You've probably seen our delidding tests. We tested the i9-7960X about a year ago and delidded it at the time using liquid metal to fill the gaps. One thing we didn't do was remove the silicone adhesive around it. We found later that that improves temperature a bit more, but we left it there as a guide and then let it run for a year or so with liquid metal on it using Thermal Grizzly Conductonaut. There are multiple different types of liquid metal. We didn't test all of them. That's one of the big things here. Again, it's a case study. We are testing with a sample size of 1. So we can draw some conclusions from this, but it is by no means a sweeping result that you can apply to all liquid metals on all platforms ever. So keep that in mind. This is an experiment that is overall difficult to conduct, and it's even harder to do with with enough platforms to build a significant sample size. I mean, you'd need like 100 systems plugged in for a year doing that, and we don't have the capacity for that. So we've got some long-term testing on this bench next to me here, and the platform is using an Intel i9-7960X that's been overclocked to 4.6 gigahertz. It's running at 1.22 volts on a Gigabyte Gaming 9 motherboard. So this is a 16-core CPU that's overclocked and locked to 4.6 gigahertz, 1.22 volts as noted. All of the overcurrent protections and other power limitations have been disabled, and the 7960X has been delidded and is using Thermal Grizzly Conductonaut as its liquid metal, with leftover silicone adhesive still in place on the double substrate. We used Thermal Grizzly Cryonaut for the thermal paste between the IHS and our cooler, but also did some tests previously with some Asetek stock paste. We used the higher conductivity paste here just to make sure it's not a limitation or bottleneck in testing. We also used the G-Skill Trident Z black memory at 3600 megahertz across 4 channels, which does impact CPU thermals because the IMC is inside of the die, and the power supply is an AX1600i in single rail mode, which is important because we're pushing over 40 amps in some of our testing, which means that multi-rail mode would trigger OCP and cause a shutdown. So for testing, the system ran FFT workloads with automated cycling for the past year. Rather than thermally strain the CPU 24/7, we did cycling. So this is something that we learned a long time ago. If you want to simulate age on any kind of electronics or any kind of thermal interface, it's better to cycle between hot and cooled down or ambient temperature than it is to just blast it 24/7, because you put the component, or in this case the TIM, through expansion and contraction periods, which significantly impacts how it ages, as opposed to just running constantly at a high heat. You're putting it through more cycles, more thermal cycles, and that is more abusive. So that's what we did to simulate age more rapidly over the past year. And in addition to that, we alternated loads with break periods, so it's more similar to a real use case in that way. And then for final thermal results, rather than using FFTs, we used Blender because it's been consistently reliable for a load generation for this kind of testing. So we used Blender for final results both before and after the liquid metal aging, and then used FFTs for the thermal cycling in between. And the Blender workload is an in-house test we use for CPU benchmarking. So it's the same one we've used for benchmarks elsewhere. And additionally, initial testing was done before the aging process and letting it age. So we did testing at the beginning, we did testing after with no changes at all. Even the thermal paste remained the same, nothing changed. We did more tests after, but changed the thermal paste between the IHS and the cold plate of the cooler, and then we did tests with new liquid metal. which is where the interest really is today. And then all these tests were conducted multiple times for parity, averaged, and we dropped some of the outlier results that'll be discussed at the conclusion. There are a couple of limitations of testing here, so we'll just put those out there to start with. For one, we're only using one sample. It's not globally conclusive of all liquid metals. We only tested one, the most popular one. And we also don't know how this will change with different components, different dyes, for example, if you're using a smaller dye versus larger. So it's limited in that regard, but we can draw some conclusions, just not hard, all-encompassing conclusions that you might if you had a huge sample size with lots of variation between parts tested. So it gives us a great baseline for a case study. And the liquid metal, it's not the only thing that ages. The thermal paste ages as well, and that's why we have tests before, after, and tests with new paste and old liquid metal, new paste and new liquid metal. And then also keep in mind that the cooler, although unlikely, could have had some aging itself. It could have had some permeation of liquid in the tubes. That's something we can't really account for in any meaningful way. And that should more or less cover it. There are lots of things that can change in a year with a test platform that's undergoing thermal aging. So we did our best to control, but just keep that in mind. These are not results you should be plastering all over the internet saying that liquid metal never ages or always ages. It's results that you should say, here's a case study where they tested one and they found these numbers. So keep all that in mind. Let's get into the results. For results, we measured the original application at 62.9 degrees Celsius delta T over ambient, and that's data from 1 year ago. Today, without changing anything, we measured thermal performance at 63.3 degrees Celsius over ambient, and this is well within our normal plus or minus 1 degree Celsius error margin for testing. And given that we have a whole lot more variables with a 1 year gap between tests than normally, these numbers are close enough that we can't state any difference. And again, potential for changes or error are introduced just in the software testing as usual, introduced in the diode monitoring on a CPU level, introduced in the cooler, the paste, motherboard aging, and a higher chance of technician error because the tests were conducted so far apart. So there was no significant change that we could measure. The change we are observing is within error margins, and if it's not error, it's more likely the paste aging than it is anything else, just from kind of drying and cracking a bit. So for that, we applied new thermal paste, but kept the CPU socketed and didn't touch the liquid metal application. With new paste applied and the old liquid metal on there, we measured performance as just under 65 degrees over ambient. Again, this is within reasonable error. We are also using a different tube of Cryonaut this year versus last year, so that could further factor into the results if the batches were different. With the new liquid metal application, we measured performance at around 63.5 degrees Celsius over ambient, which is within reasonable error of both our original result and the new thermal paste result. So that's it. It's basically the same for this platform, this testing. We were not able to find any meaningful difference. And we did control quite a bit here, as much as we could within reason. There are things that you could learn potentially with a higher sample size for sure, but this gives us at least a baseline to say with this specific system, this specific liquid metal application that was done, there was no meaningful aging that we saw within the 1 year time period. Now, does that change over 2 years? We don't know. And unfortunately, we won't be able to test that because it was pulled the test at 1 year. So maybe we'll set something up. We had other liquid metal application results that didn't make it into the charts, but I want to highlight them because from the one you saw, the final liquid metal application that was done days ago as opposed to a year ago, that was our third of 3 attempts to apply liquid metal for the new test. Just like the original data that you saw was our third of 3 attempts to apply liquid metal for the original 1 year long test. And the reason for that, and the reason for bringing it up, is that it's sometimes tricky. It can take a few tries to really get liquid metal to work the way you want it. You can get it to work pretty damn well most of the time, but if you're really being a stickler about it, then the surface tension, the amount of liquid metal, the specific way that you applied the IHS, the way the socket clamps and potentially moves the IHS, all of that impacts performance, sometimes more significantly than others, where you can get a couple cores that are maybe 90 degrees while all the others are in the high 70s. And so that's something that we didn't like, and specifically applied liquid metal until they were all pretty consistent and about where we wanted them and considered to be the best liquid metal application we could do. But again, the point of this and the point of detailing it is that the third of 3 attempts for each, the before and the after liquid metal testing result, were taken, and the other 2 weren't that great. And that means that there's more variance, more room for thermal performance change when you initially apply the liquid metal than there is over a year of using it, as far as this system tells us. Anyway, we can't draw a firm conclusion there, but as far as we know from this testing, there's far more chance for poor performance from just a bad application than there is from aging, and that means also that it's really hard to measure differences, because if the difference is significantly greater from the way the technician applies liquid metal than it is from any of the other factors like aging, it's pretty difficult to tell a difference in any kind of testing unless you have some kind of automation to apply liquid metal. So keep all that in mind. But overall, there's your 1 year of testing liquid metal on a bench. Pretty controlled, as noted. We couldn't see any meaningful difference. It's within all variance and error margins that we allow for. So the Conductonaut test, we didn't see much of a change. Cryonaut is another story. We'll look at that under the IHS next. Not sure if we'll do it for a year or not, though. That might be a bit extreme for just a thermal paste as opposed to a liquid metal. And additionally, if you've had your own experience with liquid metal aging and you had a different result than us, please let us know below, because this is something where having a greater sample size will help, and having some audience participation would be great for that. So leave your experience below, whether you've been running your liquid metal for a year plus and have had no impact in a negative way, or if you've had negative impact. And then if you have other specific liquid metals you'd like to see us test, there's stuff from Cool Labs. There's plenty of other stuff out there too. Some of it's pretty old, actually. If you have specific things you want us to test, leave a comment below with what it is, and we'll look into it. Now that we have more space in the office, it's possible we could set something up that's a bit more intensive even than this one was. So thanks for watching. As always, subscribe for more. Go to store.gamersnexus.net to pick up one of our merchandise products like our new mouse pads, or go to patreon.com/gamersnexus to help us out directly. Thank you for watching. I'll see you all next time.